the 4-minute mile.
Absolutely.
But where did it start even earlier for you? Before you got to the 100,000,
Sure.
what was the biggest day before that?
It was like 22,000.
Okay.
And, you know, and it was, and that had done about 40,000 in a week.
Right.
And why I remember this so much is because the goal for me always, which we've kind of talked about a little bit before, just, you know, talking today, for me, my goal early on was just 40,000 a year. Because I knew that number, I wanted, of course, billions one day.
Right.
But I knew with that number, I wouldn't have to have a real job. Right? So, you know, 40,000 for me was the number to be able to do my own thing.
Right.
And so when I did that 2 or 3 years earlier than that, in a week, and for me, that was just mind-boggling, you know. But it was about a $20,000 day if we're comparing it to days.
Right.
And then before that, you know, it was probably about $4,500, and I remember that specifically.
You were telling me when we first talked.
Yeah.
That was the one you were telling me about.
Well, that's the one that probably meant the most to me.
Why? Now, by the way, if there's somebody watching, you hear these $1 million numbers, and it's like, some of you are like, I'm going to do that. Others are like, I don't need $1 million, or I don't believe that's possible. But $4,500 in a day is what a lot of people would love to be able to make in a month.
Of course,
right?
Of course.
Why did that one mean so much to you?
I think because that was the most that ever came in, you know, at one time above maybe $400 or $500.
Right.
It just all came in at once in one small period of time, and I was like, wow, you know, I can really see the potential of doing something in a short period of time.
Right.
You know?
So you've literally lived that model that we teach, we talked about previously, which is the potential's there for anybody. You got to get yourself to take action, and the right actions, and you'll get the result. But the problem is most people don't believe to start with. And you just built that belief by getting your first, you know, $400 day, and then turning eventually a $4,500 day, and then a $20,000 day, and then a $100,000 12 minutes, and then one day you're doing $1 million and breaking the records in the world, and now you do many of these $1 million days, right? So what would you say?
And that's why I talk about that make a dollar first thing that I told you about.
Yeah, tell me more
so
about
when I, you know, teach students and try to get the, you know, people that have never made any money for themselves, or even if they're already doing something, and I get them to kind of start over to go in a new direction, you know, well, backing up for a second. So, you know, the first thing I ask people is like, well, how much money do you want to make?
Right.
And the wrong answer that I get from people is, well, as much as possible.
Yeah,
as much as possible doesn't exist.
That's right.
And I know you're big into specifics and getting people to think specifics, and so am I, because you can reverse engineer any number. If you want to make 10 million a week, there's a plan for that.
That's right.
But I tell everybody, but you have to start with making a dollar first. There's almost been no one in the history of mankind that's made $1 million, whether it's in a day, an hour, or 10 years, before they made $1.
Yeah, without a doubt.
So it starts with that smallest level of you know, incremental progress.
That's why they always say the second million's always easier to make.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the first million is the learning process.
Exactly.
And you take that million concept and you bring it down to the dollar, and that's achievable. So one of the things I think the message is for people watching, what's holding them back is thinking they have to do 100,000 in a minute, or 1 million, or 10,000, or some big number. What they really have to do is just first show themselves that they can make some money.
Actually,
and then
to validate to the brain that, hey, this works.
That's
what I'm doing.
That's right.
Because
and once they get that certainty.
Yeah, because if someone can put in the work to make $1 at any process, they're 90% of the way to making $100,000 with the same process.
Right.
You just do more of the same thing.
And you leverage it. And technology allows you to leverage it without anywhere near the amount of energy.
Easily.
You know? And that's the difference between having a job and having a freedom, you know, the life that has total freedom in it.
And that's why also, you know, you're talking about like your second million's easier than your first million. It's the same belief concept in all this. Why people that build fortunes and something happens and they lose everything can start over so quickly and get it all back. Like, I believe that about myself. If you took away everything that I have today, I would probably be back where I am and probably beyond it in a few months.
Yeah. Because you've made the shifts inside yourself that made it possible in the first place, and you know you can do it both. There's a gentleman, I'm blanking his name, I think he was the big advertising guy. I apologize, I can't think of his name. True story. He built a fortune of about $500 million, got it to $750 million, and then he cashed out and he bought I think it was the Stop and Go franchise, like 7-Eleven, and in 3 or 4 years lost it all, almost $1 billion. And he was 62, 63 years old. In 4 years, he made $1 billion. He got the stuff back, and he got everything it took him, you know, 60 years plus to be able to earn, and then some in 4 years, because inside of him, and I think that's the beauty of this, you have to shift what's going on in you to shift what's going on in your world. If you make those shifts inside of yourself and you learn how to do that, there's no limit to what you can achieve or what you can create in your life. And you're proof of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it starts with the smallest amount of progress. Any progress at all is worth gold compared to no progress. And people don't realize that. Most people, when I say, let's focus on making that first dollar, you know, most people's natural reaction is, you know, like, oh, $1, what's that going to do for me?
Yeah.
And I'm like, you have no idea the power of what it will do inside your head and what it will do for you if you just make that dollar, because you're just so much closer to the $100,000 that you want to make in a year or a month or whatever it is than you are without that. And so it starts with that, and then obviously the beliefs just, they exponentially compound to greater and greater beliefs. And so that's exactly what happened with me, where we started this conversation, with the $1 Million Day and where that all began. For me, it was a progression. You know, I wish it would have happened faster in my life. I wish I would have had you telling me, I wish I would have known more about how you structure belief systems and how you can get it inside your head to take it to a higher level. I didn't need to go through all those years before I would finally believe it myself. And so that's the challenge for people, is you can believe that. You can believe the $1 Million Day today, which many people ended up doing after I accomplished that. And that's why it happened for others. Same thing with the 4-minute mile. All those other runners were like, well, he did it. And then, bam, 20-something people went and did it right away, and who knows how many since then.
Well, high school students are doing it now,
literally. Exactly.
Literally.
Exactly. So
I think, well, I want to thank you for sharing this, because it reminds people that if somebody has already, you know, taken the path and made it possible, it's not something that's never been done. Your ability to get there can happen so much more rapidly, but you got to start with the first increment and not be embarrassed by that or think like it doesn't matter. I always tell people, one thing equals happiness: progress.
Right.
If you're not where you want to be financially, you're not where you want to be physically or in a relationship, make some progress. Even if you haven't lost the weight yet, but you start walking, you start jogging just a little bit. After 4 or 5 days, you're going to feel good. And the same thing's true financially. Get yourself on a program and start making progress. Even if you're not there yet, you're making a few $1,000s, a few $100s. It'll give you momentum, and momentum is how you go from $400 a day, $4,500 a day to $1 million plus in a day, and anyone can make it happen. That's the message.
And you just touched on the key, I believe, as well. The momentum is the most powerful force in all in building wealth. It's just like, literally like that snowball going downhill.
But you got to get that first tip over the edge, right?
And that's for most people the hardest thing, or the thing that never happens, unfortunately, for most people. They don't get the pebble rolling down the hill. Because they're just thinking of the big boulder, and that's what they want in their lives, is the big boulder already churning. But they don't realize that if they just give the little flick to the pebble to get it started, that it's almost like everything else mentally takes care of itself. It just compounds and compounds. So, you know, hopefully people watching this, that's what they take away from this, is that the millions or the, you know, hundreds of thousands or whatever it is that they desire financially in their lives is only going to come to them by starting with that smallest amount first and then just letting it accelerate. It doesn't mean if you start with a small amount that it has to take years and years and years for it to reach 100,000 a year or whatever else. But I think the main point here is that must start. There is no other way around it to get what you want except to start with the smallest increment, which I believe is just $1, and getting the process going and then just letting it grow and multiply.
That's perfect. Thank you. I think it's going to make a difference for a lot of people.
Sure thing.
Really
Sure
awesome.
thing. Good talking to you.